What would happen if PSA actually slowed down? I know this seems unthinkable if you've been in the hobby since 2020, but what if PSA's flow just slowed down by 30 to 50%? What would happen? Do you guys think it would be like 1929 and a massive crash? Or do you think people would just switch to the other grading companies? I'm going to walk through some of the different scenarios that I think we would see if PSA just slowed down. So let's be clear about PSA's role in the hobby right now. They are like the central bank. They are the money printer. Everything revolves around their slabs and what the PSA 10 value is, the gem rates, etc. You've got the whole ecosystem here. Dealers are submitting in bulk. Many times they'll actually borrow against slabs, which I've heard is kind of crazy. I've also heard rumors that PSA is starting to collect upfront payments from dealers, which is an interesting way to mess with demand. But regardless, that's a big part of it. Auction houses rely on a fresh supply of PSA slabs. Influencers build content around grades popping. All of the repackers are completely and totally dependent on PSA, every single one of them. And that has been a massive 2.5 year liquidity injection into the hobby that could be crimped pretty bad if PSA slows down. So if grading slows, the slab supply obviously slows, and that affects the show inventory, the comp velocity on eBay, the auction hype cycles, and again, the dealer cash flow. It flows all back to us. So I think immediately you got to break this down. We've got a dealer liquidity crunch, big time. If they can't get their hands on the very asset that makes them liquid, then all of a sudden the money's not flowing like it is for them, and their revenue is probably cut with a similar ratio. So if PSA's flow gets cut in half, they get cut in half. And who's going to feel that? The people downstream. I mean, the other way to think about it is, what if turnaround times double? We've seen this before, and we've seen it happen. Capital just sits, the cash tightens, and the aggressive buying stops, because it's like a stock market where you try to trade Disney at 9 a.m. and you can't trade Disney until the 4th of July from the order. And that's not good for any economy. So I think it would be a disaster so far. Auction houses are going to feel it. So eBay, with their booming collectibles on their earnings call, which I highly recommend you listen to quarterly, because they're one of the few public companies in our space that's required to share information about the market quarterly. Those quarterly calls are going to get dark real quick because the supply isn't there. People aren't getting the cards through PSA. They're not submitting them because, again, we have said that it has been cut in half. So now the inventory going to PSA has been cut in half. The vaulting has been cut in half. And the buying and selling has basically been cut in half. And so eBay is going to take a hit because that is a very profitable part of the company. And then the big auction houses like Golden and Heritage, they're just going to be like looking at their watches, waiting for inventory, waiting for liquidity. I imagine there will be a shift to things that have already been slabbed, likely vintage. You may see vintage demand increase in this case, where modern takes a massive hit. But what about prices? This is where it gets interesting. There's really two outcomes or two roads here. Scenario A, scarcity pushes the prices up. There's less supply, so PSA 10s are harder to get, and the pop reports tighten, and the top tier cards rise. I could see that happening. Scenario B is kind of what I just talked about, where buyers are hesitant, the dealers are conserving cash, we are conserving cash, there's fewer comps, price discovery is not there, and the market stagnates. Which one happens depends on confidence, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. If PSA slowed down, it would have to be, you'd have to decide how long. So a month, not a big deal. 2 months, not a big deal. But let's say they're going to slow down for 12 months. You will see competitors gain ground. TAG and CGC will definitely gain ground. And actually, they might have some value increase. If you don't like PSA, it's an interesting strategy. This exercise actually shows you what would happen if you voted with your wallet. We're assuming that they slow down, and there's a lot of negative effects for the hobby. But one of the more positive ones is that the competitors will gain ground, and it won't be as much of a monopoly. I think the raw market grows. I spoke to, I had a dealer on this channel. He only deals in raw. I think that market, people buy and sell raw cards. They sit on raw cards. The closets are going to swell. I think you will see crossovers increase potentially, and alternative grading might become legitimized, which I think we can all kind of go for. Like the market share will shift very quietly. Now, again, this comes down to confidence. We have scenario A and scenario B. And so if we are confident as a hobby or in the health of the hobby, I think the scarcity will push prices up. If we do not have confidence, and maybe there are other macro events happening, I think that's when the liquidity freezes and things are not good for the hobby. It all stems on confidence, much like the stock market. Now, so far this is just a fairy tale, I'm just waving a magic wand, but why would PSA slow down? One could be they just can't keep up with demand and they choke turnaround times. So throughput management, just basic things like that. Labor issues. What if there is a labor union formed and they go on strike? I mean, it's not the wildest thing to think, right? Like the first grader union comes into play. It's a small market, but there's enough people that are passionate and been in their jobs long enough where it might matter. I mean, again, I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer here, but we've been on a bull run for cards for like, 6-7 years? I mean, what if the market just cools like a little bit? This is just a thought exercise. I'm not saying I think this is going to happen, but what if that would do it too? Really, like if you think about PSA, they are the central bank of the hobby, obviously, but they also control the speed of the hobby. The question is, do they control the market fully? I don't know the answer. They control many aspects of it. Grading, vaulting, the relationship with eBay. You've got the GameStop stuff, so you have submissions there. They're dipping into the LCSs by having submission centers in them. And they've got their toes in everything except card production. So the entire ecosystem depends on one big bad grading machine, and that's power. But with power comes, as Spider-Man says, responsibility and also risk. With great power in one company comes severe risk. If there is a labor shortage, if there is a throughput issue, if there is market sentiment change, the risk is levered up big time by the pedestal that we have put PSA on. And my personal thought on this, I think if grading slowed down, I actually think things will get very ugly. It either means things are already ugly, or it's like the cough and somebody has tuberculosis, it's about to get really ugly. So watch the turnaround times closely. I don't expect this to play out right now. I mean, someday it could, 29, I have no idea. But it's a good thing to think about as you think about your investment in the market, how much money you want to have in cards. It's good to understand the risk and the implications of a company having so much power. Thanks, everyone.